classes in here too, right? Engineering classes. Nice. I'm an engineer. School engineer. So, all right. How close are we? We almost got everybody in. All right. Cool. Well, welcome. Thanks for letting me come in and chat with you guys right before your break. So I heard some holiday music as I was walking down the hall. So pretty exciting, and I hope you guys are all ready for an awesome break. My name is Ben Cichy. I'm class of 95, class of 1995, and so an alumnus of Neshaminy High School here. And I want to talk to you a little bit today about sort of, well, space. That's why it's up on the screen. So we'll talk a little bit about space and sort of some of my journey and sort of how I have, since I left Neshaminy, sort of what I've been up to and work on exploring space and especially on exploring Mars, which I think is pretty cool, and want to share some of that with you guys. And then also just want to talk to you a little bit about my journey and sort of the journeys that are ahead of you, and give you hopefully some perspective, maybe some tips. Quickly, before we start, one more question for you guys. Anybody, just poll in the audience. You guys on social media? Anybody on social media? Raise your hand. You guys use social media? Still a thing? Okay, still a thing in high school? Anybody ever hear of like a tweet from some guy who had like a 2.4 GPA and like had trouble in college and persevered through it? Anyone? Nobody? Ooh, a few. Okay. All right, well, we'll talk a little bit about that. That's what we're going to get to. So we'll get there. We're going to talk about that. But let's start in. So first off, this is me. So since I left Neshaminy High School, I had the great honor of spending a lot of years working at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. Most of that time at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, working on Mars missions. This is me standing in the control room for Mars Curiosity. Anybody hear of Mars Curiosity? Nice. Okay, so Mars Rover on Mars. I worked that for a lot of time that I was at NASA. I'm going to talk about that. So this is me standing in the control room. Before that even happened, actually that was my second Mars mission, and I've worked on 3 now. So since I left Neshaminy, I worked on first just a stationary Mars lander called Mars Phoenix, which landed at the North Pole of Mars. And then I worked on Mars Curiosity, which is this center rover here, about $2.5 billion Mars rover. You don't want to screw it up. So that was a fun challenge to work on. I'll talk a little about it. And then I also worked on the latest Mars rover, kicked off the latest Mars rover, which is called Mars Perseverance, which has actually had a really exciting week. And I'll show you a little bit about kind of what Mars Perseverance is going to do and some of the accomplishments just in the last couple days. So I worked those 3 different Mars missions. And again, sort of in the control room, got to be there on the day of landing, and I'll show you a video of what it's like to be in a control room for a Mars landing. I got to help build the rover. Here's me in a bunny suit. So when we build these rovers, we can't get them dirty. We don't want to take pieces of ourselves to a place like Mars. So we start from very clean, these special clean rooms where you have to get all suited up so that you won't get any pieces of hair or anything on the rover, and you take an air shower going into them, and you suit up in this bunny suit. And so here's me standing in front of Mars Curiosity while she was getting all tested out at the Jet Propulsion Lab before we shipped her off to the launch site for launch. And I've had the privilege of going around and talking about Mars Curiosity. So here's a talk that I gave in Paris, and really sharing with the world about some of the exciting things that we do in Mars exploration and some of what it means to kind of be an explorer in this day and age. Right now, I work for a company called Blue Origin. I'll talk a little bit about what Blue does and a little bit about the cool, amazing time that you all live in and sort of what's coming next. We work on, first right now, space flights for suborbital tourists, but we also work on, building and learning how to reuse space vehicles and ultimately how to make astronauts out of all of us. But before all that happened, I went here. And so this is my graduation night at Neshaminy High School. And so I graduated back in 1995, had a lot more hair back then, although maybe it wasn't as spiky. This was my graduation night. I grew up my whole life in the Neshaminy School District. I went to Oliver Heckman for elementary school, went to Neshaminy Junior for junior high school, went to Neshaminy High School. Spent my whole time living in Langhorne, across the tracks from Pendel, going to Brothers Pizza. So I'm a product of this area of the country. Since I've moved to LA, I've lived in Denver, I've lived in Seattle, and that's where I live now. But Philadelphia and Lower Bucks County and Langhorne is really my home. So I come from here. I come from where you guys are from. And even before graduation night, one of the really indelible parts of my Neshaminy High School career is that I was a big member of the marching band. So here's one of my marching band photos. And this is me in my marching band uniform. And it's funny how being a part of the band and being part of this high school and this institution really sticks with you through everything you do in life. So let me talk to you a little bit about what that education and that experience has done for me and sort of brought for me. I've ever since I was a little kid, I had looked up at the stars and thought about what's out there and what can we learn from these other planets around us. What are these stars, and what does it mean for us to be in this universe? And what I can remember very, very clearly looking up and seeing this little red spot in the sky when I was a kid and wondering, that's a next world next to us. Could there be life there? What is Mars like? And was Mars ever like Earth? And so that's really propelled me into my career today. Now, Mars is impossibly far away. It's 150 million miles away. Even though it's our next closest neighbor in terms of a planet, it's 150 million miles away, which means that if a flash of light happens on Mars, and you have even the best telescope in the whole entire world, it'll take 14 minutes for that flash of light to get from Mars to Earth. Think about that, 14 minutes. So if we want to go explore Mars, it's not like you can play it like a video game. It's not like you can go there and drive your rover, put on your VR goggles and drive your rover around. No, because everything you take it takes 14 minutes to get there and 14 minutes to get back. And so that makes it incredibly challenging to explore this place, incredibly challenging for us to answer some of these big questions we have. So what do we got to do? We got to build really smart robots, like Mars Curiosity, and here's Mars Curiosity in the clean room again. The first thing we do is we test them out on Earth. We have them drive around obstacle courses. We have them put them through their paces like they're driving over rocks on Mars. My favorite part about these photos is that if people lie under these rovers and actually look up at them and think about how every single wheel, every single mechanism, every single piece of that rover is going to work on Mars. And every single piece of that rover is designed by a single person, just a regular person who went through school and dreamed about exploring Mars and now is able to build this piece of us and send it to Mars. But getting a rover like that to Mars is really, really hard. I've had the pleasure of working on those 3 Mars missions. I've actually contributed to 4 total. And to get a rover like that to Mars, how the heck do you do that, right? It weighs over 1,000 kilograms, right? So it's basically the size of a car. And so how do you get something like that to Mars? And really, the first thing we do is we package it up inside a little cocoon, a little protective shell. This is called an air. That's our first step in getting a big rover like that to Mars. The next step is you put a big heat shield on the bottom of that cocoon. And so this is so that when it's smashed into the Martian atmosphere, it can be protected from the intense heat of the entry into the Martian atmosphere. But that's not enough. That won't slow us down enough. When we enter the atmosphere, you're going about 13,000 miles an hour. You slow down from that heat shield down to about 600 miles an hour, and then you got to deploy a parachute. And so we stitch to the top of these rovers. We stitch these giant parachutes that we test in. This is in a wind tunnel in California, where we actually test these parachutes out before they get to Mars. So we have a giant parachute, and still even that's not enough. The parachute's only going to slow that rover down to about 200 miles an hour. And then, what are we going to do? Let's get a rocket backpack and stuck it on the back of that rover, right? So the next thing we do is we design and we get a rocket backpack that we bolt to the back of that rover. And that rocket backpack is what ultimately allows that rover to land safely on Mars. We stack all these things together almost in like a pancake. They got to stick on top of it. And so you can see the different layers of the rover as it comes together. And then that whole thing has to get packaged up and put on the top of a rocket in a nose cone. So here's the giant nose cone that we put on top of that. And then that gets packaged up and then shipped down to the launch pad. Here's in Florida at Cape Canaveral. Goes out to the top of a rocket, gets mated up to one of the most powerful rockets that's ever been built, and then gets launched into space. So all that has to happen in order for you to get a rover to Mars. And so this has been most of my job for most of my career, was working on figuring out how can you make all of that work? How can all of that come together to be successful? So all of that has to work exactly right to be able to explore Mars, to be able to land a rover on Mars. So I want to share with you a little bit about what it feels like to be in the room when that happens. And so there's a great video here, and I want you to watch a little bit, give you some context. And if you look in the back row, if you look in the second to last row in this control room, you'll see me there on console on landing day. So see if you can be eagle-eyed and pick me out. But let's watch this video.
Things are looking good. Coming up on entry. Vehicle reports entry interface. At this time, it'll begin pressurizing the propulsion system to increase.
So this is about all the
thrust
people
of
who
system.
watched Curiosity
We'll use
land
that for
from
all
all
the
over the
maneuvering in
world.
the atmosphere we're about to do. We are standing by for guided start of guided entry. We are beginning to feel the atmosphere as we go in here. The vehicle has just reported via tones that it has started guided entry. At this time, the vehicle is beginning to steer its way to the target. We have seen peak deceleration. That is starting its first bank reversal. It is reporting that we are seeing G's on the order of 11 to 12 Earth G's.
So that's the heat shield hitting the atmosphere.
Bank reversal 2 is starting.
You can see me right there.
We are now getting telemetry from Odyssey. We should have parachute deploy around Mach 1.7.
So there's a giant parachute.
Parachute is deployed.
We took some pictures on the way down.
We are decelerating. Heat shield has separated. We've found the ground. We're down to 90 meters per second at an altitude of 6.5 kilometers and descending. Standing by for batch shell separation. We are in powered flight. We're at altitude of 1 kilometer descending. Standing by for sky crane. Sky crane is started.
Signal to us, you remain strong.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars. Time to see where our curiosity will take us.
So I like this video just because it shows a couple of things. One is all these, the people in the control room are just celebrating who have been working for a decade on making this work. But also shows all these people around the world who got to share in this excitement with us. So it's a pretty surreal experience to be able to sit in a control room and see something that you spent basically a decade of your life working on, either work or fail. Like, you don't know whether it's going to work. In fact, as I said, it took 14 minutes for the signal to get back from the surface of Mars, right? And all of that, everything that takes place from the time we hit the top of the atmosphere until the rover is safe on Mars, all completes in 7 minutes, right? It's all over in 7 minutes, which means that it's already done by the time we even start to hear about it in the control room, which is a pretty crazy thing. Like, your 10 years of your life come down to these 7 minutes, and you don't even get to hear about it until after it's already over. It's a pretty crazy thing. So if you ever wonder why, if you ever watch a big space event, or particularly going to Mars, and you ever wonder why everybody's so excited in the control room, it's because everything they've been working on comes down to that single moment, and you're just watching at that point, and all you can feel is the tension of the last 10 years of your life working on that, and then you come back and you get grainy pictures like this, and that's what brings a tear to your eye in the control room, because that means it all worked, that you actually made it there. And you have the shadow of your rover with a mountain off in the distance on the surface of another world, which is really a crazy thing to think about, that you can actually do that we can do it as a community of scientists and engineers, that's something that's even possible. Something that's 150 million miles, we're gonna send a 1,000-kilogram rover and land it on the surface of Mars. So it's a pretty amazing thing. And now we get to build on that and go on from there. And so that was Curiosity, which landed 10 years ago. Just a couple years ago, Mars Perseverance landed. And so here's a picture of Mars Perseverance on the surface. And one of the great things about these rovers that we weren't able to do with past Mars spacecraft is that we built in the capability for them to take selfies of themselves. They have cameras at the end of their arms, and they can take pictures of themselves. And it's not just about the picture of the rover. These rovers are a piece of us, right? When you take a picture of something that you built, and these are all built by hand, right? There's not some robot that builds the robot, right? They're actually humans, technicians, engineers, and scientists who build every single part of this rover. And so it gets to Mars, and you can take a picture of it, and it's really a piece of us that's now on the surface of Mars. And this actually kind of feels like, it could be your friend, if you have a friend as a robot. And so Perseverance is now exploring around Mars. Now, Perseverance is a really special robot. I've worked on Mars Phoenix. Actually, I worked on Mars Insight too, and then Mars Curiosity. I got to kick off Mars Perseverance. And the special thing about Mars Perseverance is that Mars Perseverance, we sent it all the way to Mars, but we're actually going to bring part of it back. And that'll be the first time that we ever brought back something from Mars. Perseverance has a really challenging job. Perseverance's main job is to go find samples on Mars, find pieces of Mars that might help us answer some of the biggest questions we have, not just about Mars, but about ourselves. Was there ever life on Mars? Is there life elsewhere in the solar system? That's what we're trying to do with these rovers. And Perseverance will help us start to answer that by looking for places life might have been in a stream bed on Mars, and picking up samples of those and actually bringing them back to Earth. And how it's going to do that is pretty cool itself. I have another video to show you on that. But that right on the tip of at the end of Perseverance's arm, in addition to the awesome selfie stick camera that you already saw, is a cool drill, a drill that can drill into rocks, can drill into the soil on Mars, and be able to take a sample inside this drill bit. And you can see it's actually a hollow drill bit. And inside there, we can get actual pieces of Mars and package them up in a little tube. This is actually a picture coming from Mars of the first sample that we collected. And then this just happened 2 days ago, and actually just came out yesterday, which is that those tubes that have been collected on Mars, Perseverance has started to drop them onto the surface. Now that might not seem like the most important thing. It actually might seem kind of silly. Why you drop these samples that you spent all this time and billions of dollars to collect? Well, actually, that's how we're going to go collect them up. That's how the Perseverance team will ultimately leave these samples behind for them to be returned by the next robot to Earth. And so here is that first sample that will come back to Earth. And this is the first piece of another planet that will ever come back to Earth. And think of the questions that might help us answer. But I want to show you how it's going to come back. And that's a pretty cool story, too. Let's check out this video. So this is an animation. This hasn't happened yet, but it starts with Perseverance and collecting those samples. And then what's going to happen in your guys' lifetime is it will land another lander on Mars that will actually have the job of bringing those samples back. So there's one of those sample tubes, either collected straight from Perseverance or picked up off the soil. Get put in basically a football, a sphere that has a bunch of samples in it. And then, wait for this. This is the amazing things we can do, or will do. We're actually going to launch it in a rocket from the surface of Mars with Perseverance watching. Send it into orbit around Mars. Release it from the rocket. Have it be caught by another spacecraft. And then that spacecraft will bring it back to Earth. that little capsule will come in and land basically in Utah, and then that will be how the first samples get back from Mars. So all of this to say, what an amazing time you guys live in. This is going to be what your generation gets to do. You're going to pick up the baton from the generation of Mars explorers, and you're going to get to actually study and learn about another planet in a way that nobody ever has. And it's just some of the amazing things that you can do with your education and by embracing this spirit of exploration. And one of the quotes, one of my favorite authors and explorers is a gentleman named Carl Sagan, not with us anymore, but he wrote a number of books and was a real popularizer of science, and really inspired me when I was a kid. And he has this quote that I think really sums up why we do this, right? Why go to Mars? Why explore? What Carl says is, exploration is in our nature. We began as wanderers, and we are wanderers still. We have lingered long enough on the shores of this cosmic ocean. We sail for the stars. And so when you think about that, that's what we're doing here. We have this planet that's right next to us, and what we're doing is we're going there to learn about ourselves, to learn about exploration, to learn about where we came from. And it's because it's who we are. Some people ask, why do we explore Mars? Well, that's what we do. We explore. You're all explorers, and so what will you do? What are you going to explore? Maybe it's not space. Maybe you're not going to explore Mars. But what are you passionate about, and what will be your exploration? And I hope that you can look at some of what is happening and what the teams have done, and some of the accomplishments of my career, and you can think, well, what's that spark of exploration going to be for me? Now, it's not all about Mars. We really do, as I said, we go to Mars to learn about ourselves. One of the big questions we have is has Mars ever looked like Earth? And we know that it has. And so Mars was once a wet world with an ocean and an atmosphere. And so what is Mars? And that by going to Mars, by exploring Mars, by bringing back pieces of Mars, we can answer some of those questions. But not just where did the oceans on Mars go, but was there life, and what does that tell us about ourselves? Lately, my passion has turned towards something closer to home, and taking that spirit of exploration and moving more towards how can we not just learn about what's out there in space, but what's closer to home, and how we can start to extend our life out into space. And I think a great way to start that is with exploring the moon. It's been just it's amazing what time you guys live in, because we've just kicked off now bringing back a sample of another world to learn if there's life elsewhere in the universe. And not only that, just 2 weeks ago, we started to explore the solar system again as part of this is SLS, the Space Launch, NASA Space Launch System. And on top of this was the Orion spacecraft. And this is the first time in 50 years where we have returned to the moon. And so now we're going to actually start that journey, not just of learning about other planets, but now taking our next steps out into the solar system, back out into the universe, and taking the wading that cosmic ocean. So super excited. I don't know if you guys have been following this. I hope you have. Ryan did a lap around the moon this past a couple of weeks ago, returned last week. And I think one of the images that really caught me about Orion's journey and this journey of this spacecraft into space is that it doesn't have humans on it yet. In 2 years it will, but it was able to capture some images of just Earth from out past the moon. And it's amazing to think about that on that little speck, that little blue dot is where you live. It's where everybody you ever known has lived. That everything you know is in that one little speck of this image. And it helps to think about, it puts in perspective what we're doing, why we explore. We explore to get new perspectives on ourselves. And so here, actually, this is not the first image we've captured like this, where we have taken a picture of ourselves, a self-portrait. Not like that self-portrait of the rover on Mars, but a self-portrait of our entire world from far away. On the left here is that image from Orion, and then on the right is an image from an earlier robotic spacecraft that turned and took a picture back of Earth. And you can actually, just in that little tiny center of the image is that dot, that pale blue dot. And so I'll go back to Carl Sagan, because I think he puts it very eloquently. So think about that exploration, and when you see that dot, think about what it tells us about ourselves. So what Carl said was, look again at that dot. That's here, that's home, that's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you have ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. So how amazing is that? That we can send robots, we can send these spacecraft out into the solar system, we can learn about ourselves, that, our place in that universe is that pale blue dot. And I think it gives us perspective. Actually, if you read the rest of what Carl wrote about it, he said, that teaches us not that we are a small speck in the universe, but that just how important it is that we are kind to each other, that we protect that special place that we have because it's really unique in the universe. So what else is going on in exploration right now? And all this is just sort of a context of what an amazing time you live in. All of that, the exploration of Mars, the exploration of the moon, has also now brought into the third exciting area of what you're going to go be able to build on with your careers. And that's this now push towards commercial exploration. One amazing company that we've been able to watch do amazing things is called SpaceX. They have opened up reusing rockets and being able to land rockets. My kids now don't even realize that there were rockets that weren't able to land at one point in time, and that when you launch a rocket into space, well, why can't you land it and reuse it? And that's an amazing thing that these companies and we as a community have now been able to build rockets that are reusable and really open up space not just to governments, not just to NASA, but to these commercial companies and to ordinary civilians. And I think what's really amazing about that is not so much that there's corporate companies that do that, but for the last 50 years, ever since the Apollo astronauts, ever since the Mercury astronauts, the Gemini astronauts, astronauts have been this defined by being, working for a government, mostly being white males, right? And now your generation gets to redefine what it means to be an astronaut. And one of the things that's really exciting about this time, and what I think, is a real shift in our view of how we explore the world, has been now astronauts are regular people. We're starting to see that, just this past year, we've had our first ever completely civilian crew go into orbit around the Earth. And just 4 regular people who now dream big dreams and got to go explore space. And so that's what's ahead of you. How will you explore, and what could be your part in exploring space? We're even SpaceX will in a couple years even send an entire crew around the moon. And so this is what I spend most of my time on these days, is that I work on helping us to redefine what it means to be an astronaut, redefine what it means to be an explorer, and really to open it up to your generation to explore and to be able to go into space and be able to set sail for that cosmic ocean, like Carl said. And I'll go back to this image that I had at the start. It's that first step off of Earth that I think is going to be amazing, and it's going to happen in your lifetime. And so I hope you just feel that that's just an amazing, exciting time to be alive. All of these things that's going to happen in your lifetime. We will return a sample from Mars. We will explore the moon, the first humans to explore the moon, and we'll redefine what it means to be an astronaut, what it means to be an explorer, and open it up for all of us to be able to be those explorers and to have that part of your lives. So you have an amazing, exciting time. But I want to bring it back and make it a little bit more personal for a moment. So, one of the major parts of my journey since I left Neshaminy, I got to do all these great things. I got to sit in a control room for a Mars landing. I got to, help build a rover in a clean room. I got to operate and live on Mars time. I got to now start to build spacecraft for everyday explorers, for commercial companies, and sort of helping to send humans back into space and take that first step to the moon. It's easy to think that when you look at all of this stuff, when you look at all of these amazing things, when you look at all the people in the control room that have done these amazing things, that they're somehow different, that you can't be like them, or that they have never had struggles or challenges that they've had to overcome. And so about a couple years ago, there was a thread going around on Twitter, and it was about the challenges that these really successful scientists have faced. And it started with one scientist talking about how they had failed a test in college, and how they'd come back from that moment. And so I added my voice to it, and with these 280 characters here, sort of shared with Twitter, and sort of shared with the world that when I left Neshaminy and I went off to college, it wasn't an easy transition for me. It was actually really hard. You leave sort of the community that you join a new community, and that moment of being in a new place, in a new community, and not really being able to find your way is hard. And for me, it meant that I struggled with grades when I first got into college, and so much so that that first semester of college I got a 2.4 GPA, and so I wrote this tweet that was got a 2.4 GPA my first semester in college, thought maybe I wasn't cut out for engineering. Today I've landed 2 spacecraft on Mars and am now designing one for the moon. And then really the message is that STEM is hard for everyone. Grades ultimately aren't what matter. Curiosity and perseverance matter. Now you saw that I shoved the names of the rovers in there. Weave those in. Actually, the original tweet said curiosity and persistence matter. But the message there really is we all have struggles. We're all going to fail a test. We're all going to have a hard time. And sometimes we can really focus on that failure and say, I'm not cut out for this field that I want to do. I'm passionate about space exploration. I've lived my whole life looking up at the stars and wondering what's next, and I failed my first astronomy class. I must be doing the wrong thing. Don't think like that. That's not, persevere, right? Your grade on one test won't define you. What will define you is how you get up and take the next test and the test after that, and how you study and lead your life with passion. And this all came to me because I remember this moment where, when I was at school in upstate New York, our dorms were at the bottom of a big hill. We took our tests at the top in the quads, and a number of you are going off to college, and you're going to have moments like this where you walk out of a test and you haven't done well. You failed that test. You struggled. That you didn't do well on a test, and you have a long walk back to your dorm. And all you're thinking about is how maybe you're in the wrong place. Maybe you've chosen the wrong path. Maybe you're not in the right career. And I just want you to fight that urge. That's a really lonely, isolating feeling. And when you go off to college and you feel that way, just remember that everybody's been there. Everybody's felt that way. Everyone in that control room that I showed you from landing on Mars has had struggles and has had failures that they've had to overcome. None of this is easy for anybody who does it. In fact, anybody who tells you that is glossing over the hard path that they've had to go down. And so when you have those lonely moments, when you have that moment where you think, maybe I should just give up, don't. I want to help you use me as an example. I failed tests. I got a bad GPA. I kept going, right? And that's what you should do too. Seniors, when you get to college next year, juniors, as you're thinking about maybe even applying to the college, think about continuing on and persevering through those challenges, because everybody has it. Everybody in that room is just a regular person. There's no superheroes in that room. There's not anybody who has never had challenges they've had to get through. Now, also in the tweet, I said, I've landed, and I also want to remember that it takes thousands of people to be able to do these things. And each one of these thousands of people, I'm a speck in that pale blue dot. Remember thinking about the speck in the sky? I'm a speck in this group of all the people who contribute to missions like this. And every single one of these people has a story they have to tell about the challenges they've overcome to get to where they are. And so I'll leave you with a quote that we use on the Curiosity and Perseverance team, and something that the NASA JPL team rallies around. And it's really about overcoming these challenges and when you choose your path, right? And it's a quote from Theodore Roosevelt: "Far better is it to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in a gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat. So this just means take on the hard challenge. Dare mighty things. Don't worry about the fact that you might fail. It's not about how you fail, it's about how you pick yourself up. And so keep that in mind as you go on to your next steps. And I hope that that came from my learning of perseverance that came all the way back here from Neshaminy. I can think about, I think about curiosity and perseverance. That came from my time here in Neshaminy. I remember walking into my 11th grade physics class and being inspired by learning about how the world works and how all these laws that underlie what you see, the movement of the stars, all come from a few simple principles. That sparked my curiosity. But what's yours? Maybe it's not physics. Maybe it's chemistry. Maybe it's not chemistry. Maybe it's maybe it's medical. Maybe you want to learn about you want to be curious and be passionate about how to help people, how to heal people who are sick. Right? It doesn't have to be space exploration. It doesn't have to be science. The key is dare mighty things. Try the hard things. Don't give up because of failure. That's all I have. So I think we have time for questions, right?
So when you have the samples that you're getting from Mars, what are you hoping to look for in there? Like what's our proof of life?
Yeah, so there's two types of evidence of life. There's either life that's sort of extinct life, or there's life that's actually in a sample, like actual real life right now. Mostly what you're looking for is fossils, little pieces, little microbial fossils that you can use to be able to see that in this dry riverbed there was, maybe not dinosaur footprints, but maybe there's a fossil that is an evidence of an ancient microbe. And even just sort of that evidence of primitive life tells us that there's life elsewhere in the solar system, and that's a monumental thing, and mostly what you're looking for in those samples.
So throughout all the different challenges you and your team have faced, what do you think was the most difficult design challenge to overcome?
Oh, design challenge on one of the rovers, or I think the most difficult thing is that when you're landing a rover like that on Mars, there's so many things that have to go exactly right to be able to get them to work right, that no single person can have it all in their brain. It has to work together as a team. And so I think the hardest design challenge is just actually getting people to talk to each other and to communicate. And it might sound simple, but it's actually really hard to make sure something isn't lost in translation between two different teams, that the parachute team didn't think that they were going to be deploying their parachute at a different speed than, say, the rover team thought that the heat shield was going to be able to slow the rover down to, right? And so just being able to talk to each other is sometimes the most challenging thing to overcome. And so designing into the system how you can actually communicate is probably the hardest challenge.
How powerful is the new rover?
How powerful is Perseverance? It's actually, Perseverance is an exact copy of Curiosity. And so Curiosity, except for it got upgraded wheels, because the wheels got busted on Curiosity, which is too bad. they got kind of broken by rocks. And then it has just new instruments at the end of its arm and in its belly. So powerful, it's actually really slow. It goes about like 20 centimeters, an hour, right? So it's a pretty slow rover in terms of like how fast it moves around the surface of Mars. Yeah.
Samples of the things from Mars with the elements. Were the samples of the elements on the periodic table, or no?
No, yeah. So it's all known elements, but we really don't look at it from an element standpoint. What we're really looking for is molecules. So organic molecules are the big thing that we look for. In fact, Curiosity's job was to find evidence that there were the building blocks of life, and the building blocks of life are organic molecules, carbon-based molecules. And so Curiosity found those, and then now Perseverance is following in Curiosity's rover tracks to be able to find and actually get pieces of now what we know there the organic molecules on Mars.
So kind of with what you just said, are you like, you set a
Mars Phoenix was deployed to like the North Pole. Are these are the rovers all going in the same general area, or are they going all to different spots?
No, we've been all over Mars, and actually, if you haven't seen it yet, there's a really great movie on Opportunity, which was one of the Mars rovers before Curiosity, called Goodnight Oppie that just came out. I recommend you watch it. And it talks about how Spirit and Opportunity landed on other sides. Most of the rovers land kind of towards the mid-latitudes of Mars, near the equator. We sent Mars Phoenix to the northern pole of Mars because we knew there was water ice there. And we wanted Phoenix to actually explore and scoop up some of that water ice, because what we know is about life is that life needs water. And so Phoenix was really about finding evidence of that water on Mars. And then Curiosity was following on that, saying, now that we know there's water, let's find evidence of the building blocks of life. And then Perseverance is, let's scoop up some of that building blocks of life where we think there might actually be evidence of past life, and let's bring it home. I didn't get one over there yet.
Can you talk about the steps you took after high school throughout college?
Yeah, so as I said, I went to college upstate New York, and so I was a computer nerd in high school. I mean, I've been a computer nerd my whole life, and so I really started out in computer science. And actually, that was one of the first classes that I got a really bad grade in. It's demoralizing to go, spend your whole life. I actually have a picture of me that I almost threw in from like being 8 years old and like sitting in front of a computer. And so, I went through my whole high school career really feeling like I was, knew computers inside out. And then I got to college, and that was one of the first challenges I had, was really trying to come up to speed on to master computer science at university level. And so, even the things that you think you're best at, you might struggle with, and you got to stay with it. And so I stuck with computers, and I graduated with a computer science degree. And then actually, my team was the team that wrote all the brains of the Curiosity rover. We wrote all the software for it. And so
how much longer is that until Mars sample return is finished, and also what percentage-wise are you guys done with that?
Yeah, so I don't work on Mars sample return anymore, although I help that team still. So now I'm working on building moon landers. But the Mars sample return is slated for in the mid-2030s. So about a decade from now is when we'll see those samples start to come home. Which is why it's really exciting that you guys will be in the positions to study those samples when they come back, right? So you can go to school, learn about organic chemistry, learn about there's actually a really entire field of astrobiology, which is just one of those cool, I'm an astrobiologist, one of those cool titles, right? And you can learn about astrobiology, and you get to study samples as they come back from Mars. I forgot.
After they kind of collect the samples from Perseverance, does Perseverance have any other missions to do? Like, what happens after that?
I know, it's sad to think when the rovers are kind of done, right? No, Perseverance actually has instruments on it, just like Curiosity did, for taking pictures and understanding the types of rocks it's seeing and exploring around and being a field geologist. But its main job is to collect up those samples. And really what we want to do is have Perseverance hand off those samples to the sample return lander when it gets there. And so that will be its final job. And after that, it won't have any more samples to collect, but it can still take images. It can go study rocks. It actually has a laser that can zap rocks and be able to see figure out what type of rock it is by the plume that's created from that.
Why did you switch from working with NASA to working to a different company?
That's a great question. So when I worked on Mars for most of my career, and was really to be able to kick off this Mars sample return effort and be able to work on Mars landers. I think while I was working on the Mars landers, NASA started an initiative which was to let's take that next step for humanity going out into the solar system, not just learning about other planets, but let's actually send humans out into the solar system. When NASA made that decision, they also made the decision that they weren't going to be the ones building the vehicles that were going to send. They weren't going to build the spacecraft that were actually going to land on the moon, and they were going to buy them from private companies and create this commercial marketplace for sending citizen astronauts as well as government astronauts to the moon. I said, that's cool. I'd like to go build that lander that can help create that new generation of space explorers. And so I had to go to a commercial company to be able to do that. And Blue Origin's an amazing place that has a vision of millions of people living and working in space. So, Blue is this company that's driven by how can we redefine what it means to be an astronaut? How can we move millions of people in to be able to really create that exploration? So that's why I ended up at Blue. All right, I'm just going to keep going around hands. I'm just randomly jumping back and forth. Go to the back row.
You said that like you have to wear those suits when you're building it.
Yeah.
So why can't you get stuff from us on those rovers?
That's a great question. So when you're building a rover, that rover, we send it to Mars to look for evidence of life. And so we're alive. So if we send evidence of ourselves with that rover, we might get tricked. We might go there and say, oh, look, we found this evidence of advanced skin cells or advanced, really, really advanced biology. And it might just be that there's a piece of us that we sent with that rover. And so we have to keep the rovers incredibly clean. In fact, that sample tube that's on Mars Perseverance is the cleanest object that humans have ever made, which is a pretty amazing thing. It's even cleaner than the rest of the rover. You can't even wear a bunny suit around it. It was baked out at very high temperatures and is incredibly clean.
What would you say in general is your favorite thing about working in the STEM field?
I think it's you get to take the curiosity you have, these big questions, and break them down into problems that you can actually solve. Engineering is very much taking something that you have no idea how to solve, taking a problem that's gigantic and breaking it down into over and over again into smaller and smaller pieces until you get to a problem that you do know how to solve. I mean, that is engineering, right? Take a big problem, break it down, right? And so space exploration is amazing. These big questions, are we alone in the universe, right? We don't get to bigger questions than that. How can you take engineering and break that down into small enough pieces that comes down to, let's send a rover to Mars. Let's take a sample, right? And so that's the amazing thing. I think STEM is what allows us to answer those big questions by breaking them down into problems that we can solve. And we all do it together. I think that's the amazing thing. There's thousands of people, right? I mean, cross-section of everybody from, I didn't say this a bit, the cables on that rover are stitched by hand, tied by hand by essentially tailors, and that parachute is stitched by hand, right? They're all handmade by not just engineers and scientists, but it takes craftspeople to be able to do that, and it's a pretty amazing thing. Got you once already. Skipped over you before. Go ahead.
Have people looked into going onto other planets yet?
So we don't have a lot. So we would love to go to Mars. NASA would love to go to Mars. Blue and SpaceX and other commercial companies are all building up this capability that will one day allow humans to go further in the solar system, to go to Mars. It turns out that the moon is a really great step to that. In fact, the image that I started the presentation with of where it looks like the moon is just one step away from Earth, it's a really great place for us to learn about how to explore. A lot of the other planets, at least in our solar system, are not particularly easy to explore. Venus has incredibly high pressure, right? Mercury has huge temperature swings, right? So Mars is really the planet that is most Earth-like and allows us to explore it most readily. So I think, to the moon, and then hopefully to Mars, and then to beyond. So, I got you once before. We'll go back to
obvious. Other than the obvious academic courses, what is it that you think led you to your curiosity, perseverance in high school, college? What is it that attributed to that, where others may have not been as successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned. Oh, I'm sorry, you may have mentioned. No, I want to foot stomp this because I think that. It's not just about your academic career, right? I mean, I feel like perseverance, my perseverance came a lot from music and being part of the instrumental music program here in Neshaminy, being part of the marching band. That practice, that failure in learning how to play something and in learning how to perform a drill, and whether it's music or sports, that sort of learning how to persevere until you can perfect something, until you can achieve sort of that goal you set out to, I think is really important. And you don't just get that from academics, and so that's really important. Curiosity. I think my family, and I can think about standing in my backyard and looking up at the stars with my mom, and my dad taught me a lot about engineering. So I have a fortunate family life that helped build that foundation for me. But I also see that Neshaminy and teachers play an incredibly important role in that. I think about when you look at those thousands of people who helped build a rover like this or helped make these amazing things happen. I've talked to almost all of them, and every single one of them has a teacher in their lives who helped spark that curiosity and their drive. And I mean, by name, right? To me, it's amazing that all comes from what did you find your passion? Where did you find it? And it's really, don't give up on that passion once you have it.
So excuse me to everyone, I know that Mr. Cichy is giving his time. How about 2 more questions for him, and he does have a point he has to get to.
Go ahead.
So when NASA looks at SpaceX and SpaceX looks at NASA, is it more collaboration or is it competition to who can do something first?
No, it's a partnership. NASA wouldn't be able to do what it does today in human spaceflight, right? NASA wouldn't be able to do what it does today without SpaceX. And in the future, it'll be companies like Blue Origin that I work for that will help NASA do amazing things as we go forward, not just into low Earth orbit, but to the moon, and then even to build up that infrastructure to go even further. And so, NASA can't do everything by itself. NASA is funded by you and the taxpayers and does amazing things. But for it to really live on, for it to be even what NASA calls sustainable, right? Which just means that, for it to stay, we've got to have your generation think about, what can I do in space? What are the amazing things that we can do? It's not just about taking pictures or taking selfies back of ourselves on Earth. There's communications have been revolutionized by space with spacecraft, right? You get to be able to stream your favorite TV show because of what we've done in space so far. What's that next thing? What's the next big thing that we're going to be able to do because we now have the capability to cheaply and easily go into space? Or what might you explore if you go yourself, right? And so I think it's a partnership. NASA, that's not NASA. NASA paves the way. And then commercial companies follow, improve that road to space and open it up for all of us. Other questions we haven't answered? In back over there.
You were talking about the company making rockets and stuff to go up just straight to Mars. Why not start building like a more permanent space station that would be able to, I guess, stage getting a rover to there and assemble it and then send it out, so that way it would be more effective.
Yeah. So this is using a space station as a stopover, a layover in space, right? You don't need to go directly everywhere. We don't, you don't always fly your airplane directly. Sometimes you take a stop, right? When you want to choose where to take a stop, what you want to do is go someplace that has the most resources that you can use to build stuff. If you're going to build, it's incredibly expensive stuff from the surface of the Earth, not just in dollars, but in energy. Because the Earth has a lot of gravity. So what at Blue, what we feel is that the moon is a great place where you have an immense. You can build things. You can build spacecraft. You can get water from the moon. You can get propellants for your spacecraft from the moon. And so that's a place where you can stop and you can build these spacecraft that's going to help take us further out into the solar system. Something as complicated as a rover, I think it will be a long time before we are able to harness the resources of a place like the moon or an asteroid to build something that complex. But we can, some of just the massive propellants, the fuel that these rockets use, we can get from places like that, and we can use that to take that first step into outer space. A little bit more time, by the way. I don't know what your guys' cutoff is. You're the ones who are going on break. I'm already on break.
We don't leave the school for like half an hour.
All right, who hasn't asked a question yet? I know a couple people who already have. Go ahead. Yeah. I don't mind. I played saxophone in marching band. I played saxophone all throughout elementary school, junior high, high school, and college. I did. I did. I had Mr. Lipton, I had Mr. Grant, I had amazing teachers, amazing music teachers who helped me along my journey. Mr. Lipton is amazing, and Mr. Heaney wherever he went, and yes, I am a product of Neshaminy's marching band. I mean, I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, I really do. That was my passion in high school, and I really do feel like discipline and perseverance came out of sort of my time in marching band and my time in instrumental music and jazz music, and sort of, I wasn't always the best musician, but I like to think that it taught me how to stick with it, and that's the important part. Go ahead, we'll go white shirt first, and then we'll go.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your biggest regret in your career?
Oh, that's a tough one. Whew, ouch. Biggest regret. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's a journey. I've had lots of failures in my career. Like, I don't feel like I always started out. When I first got to NASA, I wasn't working on Mars projects yet, and I really wish that if I had gotten to NASA, I could have worked on the Spirit and Opportunity rovers. I was there at the right time, but I just wasn't. I missed it by I just didn't happen to be in the right place at the right time. Even though I was in the right place at the right time, I didn't know the right people. And actually, that was really demoralizing to me. I remember when I first got to NASA JPL, I wanted to work so much on Mars Rovers because I had been so excited by seeing Mars Pathfinder, which was the first rover to land on Mars. And I just wasn't there, and it felt like such a missed opportunity at the time, and it felt like, I'm so close, but I'm not doing what I want to do. So it wasn't really a regret. I mean, I would have loved to work on that, but I actually think that moment in time, it taught me that, it's not about a single opportunity that you need to capture, right? I mean, I remember feeling like I missed out, but then, that just gave me even more resolve to work on the next project, which is what got me on Mars Phoenix. In fact, for Mars Phoenix, they said, yeah, you can go work on Mars Phoenix, but we have to send you to Denver to live in Denver for a couple of years. Like, you can't even work on it at JPL. And I was like, I'll do anything. And so I got on a plane, and they shipped me off to Denver for a couple of years. But that sort of resolve came out of that feeling of being so close but not being in the room yet. And you just got to keep fighting. So not really regrets, but there were many missed opportunities, and you just kind of persevered. So.
This actually kind of goes on with our question.
Yeah.
But is there any differences? Was there anything you started later in your career that you possibly could have started sooner? Is there anything you would have changed to get to where you wanted to go?
I think it would have been, I would have really enjoyed working on some of those early Mars missions. I think it would have been great. I think that you can't, I'll flip it a little bit. I feel like sometimes we're too rushed. And I actually see this in a lot of, my engineers who are fresh out of college, is that they immediately want to be, the lead engineer. They immediately want to be, on the track to be running the show, right? And it's actually much better to take your time. Persistence is sometimes just patience, right? And you need to be able to learn and to be able to be humble about what you don't know yet, and to be open to learning from those around you. And sometimes that means being down there, doing what might seem like not the most glorious job, but you're actually learning the most from having your hands on and taking those jobs that are maybe a lower level, but actually getting your hands the most dirty. And so don't rush. I guess that's all I'd say. Don't rush to try to be a superstar of your particular field, right? To spend the time to learn from those around you before you try to take on a job with too much responsibility.
Thank you.
Other questions? By the way, I college too, which is don't try to jump to your PhD level class when you're a freshman. Take some time to get the field. All right, we'll go back to you.
So I know you'll need to do like chemical analysis first to know for sure, but personally, do you think that life exists outside of Earth?
Well, I mean, these are the big questions that we're trying to answer, right? I think, well, there's a famous scientist by the name of, his last name's Drake, and it's called the Drake equation. And it essentially says when you look up at a star, there are hundreds and billions of stars. And if even only a fraction of those, had planets around them, and even if only a fraction of that had Earth-like planets, and even if only a very small fraction of that had the possibility of, having life, and if even only a small fraction of that had that spark that would actually allow you to have life, there'd still be billions of planets out there with the potential for having life. And so, the famous quote from from Contact is, "It'd be an awful big waste of space if if none of those had life on them." I saw one over here that I didn't get. Yeah. So I have 3 little kids. I have a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So that is most of my hobbies these days. Getting up really, really early in the morning to run is another one of my hobbies. No, I mean outdoors. So now I live in Seattle and I live in the Pacific Northwest. It's awesome. We have mountains and the sound, and so we go hiking and so just getting outside any way I can and as often as I can is my big hobby. Going hiking, going backpacking, going camping. Those are my big hobbies right now. Okay, we got anybody who hasn't asked a question, and then did you ask a question already? Anybody who hasn't? Oh, there we go.
After your undergrad degree, did you ever get a master's or PhD later?
I did. I have 2 master's degrees. I stayed at Cornell an extra year, and I got a master's degree in engineering. And then after that, I went back to school after I started working. So I was a computer engineer, and I was doing computer software, and I said, this is awesome, but I want to get into the bigger picture. And when Perseverance started off, I was the lead engineer on Perseverance. And so to get a bigger job where you're looking across a whole rover like that, I went back to school to study aerospace engineering. So I got a second master's degree in aerospace engineering. So I have two masters. And as you get older, you get more practiced in sort of how to go to school, and so it was good to go and be able to study those things. I'm going to go down the line.
Is there anything that you would have done differently in high school to get where you are?
I can't think of. I mean, I think high school there are a lot of opportunities open to you. In fact, when I went to school, I remember that there were classes you could take at the community college or studies that you could take at universities, right? I think it's really finding your passion is the most important part. I think there's nothing in high school that I would necessarily have done differently, but I think I'd recommend to folks that don't just worry about the classes that you're taking. Find out what excites you and go look for ways to do it outside of the classroom, because it really is what you do outside of the classroom is just as important as what you do in the classroom.
Neshaminy High School, it's Mr. Bueller with your PM announcements. Sorry for the delay in their presentation. We would like to thank one of our alumnuses, Mr. Ben Cichy, for joining us this afternoon and for the presentation for our students. We appreciate when alumni come back and join us and enlighten our students. And we thank those who helped set up this experience this afternoon as well.
Hi, my name is Susan Weber. I am the president of the Neshaminy Education Foundation. I once taught in this school. But since I've retired, I have been working with the foundation, and this year we are giving our first ever Alumni Achievement Awards. Hopefully someday one of you students will be a recipient. But Mr. Cichy is here today to be presented with that award, and he kindly offered to meet with the students. Mr. Heaney will be presenting the award.
I was lucky enough to get to know Ben in 7th grade through 12th grade, working with Ben. And Mrs. Bermilo McGran, also 7th through 12th grade. Awesome guy, and went very far. Ben, this is a Neshaminy Achievement Award.
A lot of achievement there, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
already, but this is going on the shelf above.
That's a special place, just like Neshaminy.
Congratulations.